Did you know that when it comes to vaccines, physician training is nothing more than obedience training? Doctors aren't taught the truth about what's in vaccines. Many doctors don't even know that vaccines still contain mercury. A lot of doctors don't even know that thimerosal means mercury. Doctors are told that vaccines contain nothing but, water or a saline type of solution and a weakened virus and nothing else. The truth is that vaccines contain aluminum, MSG, mercury, formaldehyde, polysorbate 80, what else? Adjuvants, all kinds of toxic chemicals, and also, of course, viruses that shouldn't be there. Mystery viruses, sometimes live viruses. They're not always weakened as they're supposed to be. The truth is that most doctors are never told anything about what's really in vaccines. They're just told to give those vaccines to children on this schedule. It's an insistence by the med schools. You have to be indoctrinated into the vaccine mythology, which passes for medical training. But again, it's just obedience training. So I'd like you to watch these statements from a variety of doctors you're going to see in this video who are explaining to you that they were never taught what was in vaccines, and they had to come to learn about that themselves over time. And they were shocked to discover the truth about what's really in vaccines and just how harmful and dangerous it can be to a human life. Watch these video clips, you'll be amazed.
You may not know this, but doctors are not taught about vaccines in medical school. We are not taught what's in vaccines as far as the adjuvants. We are not taught how vaccines are manufactured as far as what kind of animals go into them. We are not taught the potential dangers of vaccination, and we are basically given a piece of paper that says when the vaccines are due and to give them.
I've been in vaccines for 35 years. I didn't know that Rogam had thimerosal in it. So I think a lot of the doctors were unaware. They were unaware that even the word thimerosal meant mercury.
I ran in a pediatric emergency room, and if people came in and they weren't vaccinated, I was quite upset. And it's not that I knew much about vaccines. I did a pediatric residency. You don't really learn anything. You're taught the schedule. That's really what you're taught about vaccines. You're taught the schedule, and you're taught that it produces antibodies, and that's it. You don't get any information on innate immunity and Th1 to Th2 and, the risks, none of that.
I'm an osteopathic physician. I'm a board-certified medical doctor that I've been in my own practice since 1985. When I started in what I call my first life or my first career, I was an emergency medicine physician, and I was the director of an emergency department here in Ohio for about 12 years. All of that time in my medical training and background and education, I always thought that the only thing that was in any vaccine was a little sterile water, a little dead virus or a little dead bacteria, and that was it. When I started looking as simply as looking at the package inserts of the vaccines and started finding out that many of them are made from cow serum, kidney monkey cells, chicken embryos, dog cells, human embryo cells, chicken mouse brain cells. I had no idea that all of those things were in vaccines.
My field, the field of immunology, the basic field, the ones that sort of is responsible for all these theories of immunity, we don't really deal with the real world. We do research in labs. We are sort of an ivory tower profession, and we don't even read these publications because this is too far away from our field. We only read what's specific to our research, and usually it's immunizations and how antibodies are generated and all the details of the immune responses.
I started medical school in 1983. I'm now learning 14, 15 years later that there's mercury in vaccines. How come I didn't know this? So my question was, well, what else is in there? So I just started to explore more of the package inserts, more of the manufacturing processes, more of the adverse effects, and started reading the literature that doesn't get near medical schools and residency programs. And I started to realize that there was more information to learn than what I was originally taught.
This is the problem that I see. We don't train our medical students to be critical in terms of looking at research. We don't train our medical students to be critical about the corruption in the medical industrial complex. And so what we have are the worker bee doctors on the streets, in the offices, even in the institutions, that are clueless about corruption, and they really buy the drug company rhetoric at face value.
I went through my whole PhD training, and I believe that vaccines give you immunity, and that if you got vaccines, there is absolutely no way, virtually no way, that you would get a disease. And I'm pretty sure that most of my colleagues in my narrow field believe the same way, and we had conversations about that. And even someone at some point mentioned to me and said that they had a vaccine and they got measles, and I sort of brushed it aside, and the person is confused. It was either she didn't have the vaccine or it wasn't measles, one of the two. But what happened is that a few years ago, I had to apply for American citizenship, and part of the procedure is to submit your vaccination records, right? And this was the first time that I looked at my own vaccination records carefully, and I discovered that I had 2 measles vaccines in my childhood. Well, I didn't know about it because I was too young to remember. But what I remember really well is that when I was 11, I had measles. And so that was a little bit harder to discount. And I told recently someone else, and they said, "Oh, you are confused about that. You didn't have measles. Like, how do you know? Like, did you check your, was really the virus there or not?" So it just, the doctor's diagnosis, right? But I lived in Ukraine, and there, there was tons of measles around, and doctors knew when they saw measles. But anyway, so the reason I kind of had to look for these papers is to actually to confirm to myself whether I'm confused about my measles, or is this a general phenomenon and it's happening, and it's documented in the literature, and indeed it is documented in the literature. But immunologists don't know about it.
I know that most doctors really have not learned to look at research papers. They don't bother to read them, and if they do read them, they really don't understand how to look at them with a critical eye in terms of the variables and how it's set up with bias. So once I talk to them and challenge them, it turns out that they back down and don't really know what they're talking about. That's very common. They'll just say, when it comes down to it, what they do is they take the drug company salesperson's information at face value.
I was taught in residency, in medical school and residency, that vaccines are safe and they were effective, and that there's absolutely no reason to question it because we've done all the studies. What I've realized is that the safety that I would want for kids, having taken the Hippocratic Oath of first do no harm, is not happening. The vaccines are not safe the way we're told that they're safe. The injection of these materials has never really been evaluated in different age groups in pediatrics or in adults. We don't know where vaccine materials travel. We don't know if they go into the brain. We don't know if they go into the liver. We don't know if they go into the lymph system. We don't know if they get intracellularly and destroy mitochondria and nuclei. All we know is that they give you an IgG antibody and the disease seems to disappear, but we're not really looking to see if there's an adverse outcome greater than the actual disease process itself. I think it's hard for any physician who is so invested in the love of the children and the love of their practice to actually step back and say, am I doing something that's hurting the children in my practice? Because the foundation that's broken after they may realize that there's more that they knew, that they actually were wrong. Telling a physician that they're wrong is not an easy thing to do, let alone to have the physician actually admit that the physician is wrong. To hear a physician, it took me years to say, I don't know.
Hey, I've got a lot of amazing videos coming this year. Click subscribe now to stay informed when I release them.